Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to Making the Argument. I have a very special and relevant guest for everything that has been going on. For the last few days, we've talked a lot about what happened in Venezuela with respect to the strike. I told everyone how impressed I was as a former Special Forces guy, not a Delta guy, but a former Special Forces guy, on the absolute professionalism with respect to the special operations mission that was used to go and take down Maduro. I am thrilled that Maduro is gone. I love it anytime a socialist dictator gets what's coming to him. But the question of what happens next is something that has weighed very heavily on my mind, as well as the minds of everybody else that is watching this, especially those of us who have lived at the business end of, let's just say, not so great American foreign policy. But with me today, I have someone that I just consider to not just be a subject matter expert on this by virtue of the fact that he was born and raised in Venezuela, but this is someone I've had a chance to get to meet through Young Americans Foundation. Absolutely wonderful economist, someone who loves Venezuela, but also loves America, loves free markets, loves liberty, loves the thing that America stands for, and I know wants Venezuela to stand for as well. And I wanted to take this opportunity right now to talk to somebody that, again, until someone recently lived in Venezuela, grew up under Chavez, that could give us some insight on what do we think is going to be going down on the ground the next several months, right? What do we think the reaction is? Because we can look on social media, we can hear what the news tells us, but I wanted to hear from someone that actually knew what it was like to live there, to grow up there, that still has contacts there, family there, friends there. And so it is my honor to introduce to the audience Daniel Di Martino. Daniel, thank you very much for being on, brother.
Thank you so much, Nick. You're very admired. I really enjoy what you say. I've seen you speak at YAF, and it's really fantastic speeches, especially the personal development things that you talk about for young men.
Well, again, and I'm a big admirer of you, Daniel, and the discussions that you give, the talks that you've had, your depth and breadth of knowledge with respect to all issues economics, being a fan of free market economics as well, coming from a place that, as everyone likes to say on the left that it's not real socialism, but this was one where, if you remember, early on when Bernie Sanders and Sean Penn and everybody on the left was traveling down to Caracas to sit there and do photo ops with Chavez, talking about, see, when real socialism is applied, it works. And all those people,
when it was all fine, they were very happy to highlight them.
When oil prices were high.
I remember Stiglitz. He was meeting with Chavez at the same time he was repressing protesters. Mm-hmm. And then he has the gall to teach American college students about economics. It's really disgusting.
Well, and look, I know that you could school all of us on the lessons of, again, how badly socialism and specifically centrally planned economies fail because of their inability in order to properly calculate prices, to look at incentives, et cetera. But what I'd really like to do, and we can certainly meld that into this, but I'd really like to do is I'd like you to share kind of your experience growing up, living in Venezuela under Chavez, and try to give the American people an understanding of what did it mean for the Venezuela people under this regime, both with Chavez and Maduro, and what was it like to wake up that morning and realize essentially the world had changed? This has been two generations.
It was an amazing morning. I woke up really early for a Saturday at 6 a.m. because I had gone to sleep very early Friday night because I was tired. I was getting over a cold, and I just wanted to have a really productive Saturday. Yeah. And turns out, I didn't do anything of my plans. So everything totally changed. I have stopped my life for the last 4 days to just be on the news. I had 3 a.m. texts from Fox News saying, "Can you please come in the morning?" And I woke up at 6 and I'm like, let's shower, put on the suit, let's do this. Yeah. And just learning about the news of Maduro finally being arrested, just like how the bombs, the helicopters, the planes, I was very happy about it. And so were every Venezuelan I know. But I like how you frame this. We have to talk about what comes next because that's what matters. Yeah. If this just stops at having arrested Maduro, sure, that's a police operation and that's good on its own, but nothing would change in Venezuela. And I'm not sure what you covered is the best or worst case scenario.
Can I ask you about that? Because here's one of the things, having served in Iraq, and I remember, I was there in '06 and '08, but the early days of Iraq, all we saw was Saddam Hussein statues toppling and people out in the streets cheering and the whole deal. And it was this idea like, oh, okay, this was as advertised. The Iraqi people are
Right.
glad he's gone. And of course, they're now going to support us as we go forward. And the American administration made a lot of mistakes, right? Debathification meant that we essentially told a sizable portion of the law enforcement and military infrastructure that their services were no longer needed. And so they took their AK-47s and sold them to the highest bidder. And now we're fighting, in part an organized insurgency. But then we also had people that were they needed to feed their families. This was the easiest way to do it. One of the questions that I think a lot of Americans have when they look at Venezuela, and I don't mean this to be flippant, because all of us understand how an oppressive regime can, stamp down any sort of resistance. But the question always arises is like, okay, unless America does something next, if everything's going to devolve, then doesn't that mean that the underlying conditions in Venezuela are at a point where is removing Maduro just inviting another bad guy to take place? Because if there wasn't enough strength to remove Maduro, then does that mean that there's not enough strength for a better person to take his place now that he's gone? Or do the Americans have to send down, 20,000 troops to make that happen? Can you tell us a little bit about the underlying conditions in Venezuela?
I think that's absolutely the problem here. So that you understand what happened militarily and all that. Chavez comes into power democratically in 99. The military is loyal to the constitution, the law, the Venezuelan people, like in the United States. Because Chavez begins to become a dictator. And this is before he rigged the elections. Being a dictator doesn't mean that you just don't run elections, right? Democracy is more than votes. Yeah. Democracy is about free press, even private property, right? Taking people's businesses arbitrarily. It's about free speech. It's about political prisoners, right? So much. The military attempted a coup on Chavez in 2002 because the military was very pro-American, too, trained by America as well, partly. That coup failed after a day. I'm not going to go over the details of why, but it failed. And Chavez began a purge. The military has been purged. Every general. Now, the soldiers, the regular soldiers today in Venezuela are just starving people, Nick. It's not like they are like the generals. But every military unit, though, has at least one Cuban. Mm. Why do they do that? You would say, well, they're spies to stop any sort of coup attempt. But second, the Cubans don't have their family in Venezuela. It's in Cuba. So it's not personal for them. The soldier, their family is starving because of Maduro too. And their family hates the regime. This is a big important factor. 90+% of the population is opposed to the regime. And unlike Iraq, right, which I think this is a very key difference, Venezuela is not a Muslim country. Yeah. Venezuela doesn't have religious or ethnic hatred or language differences. Mm-hmm. So that is important.
No, it's a very important distinction. I mean, the people that try to say, oh, this is just another Iraq or Afghanistan, they're not properly analyzing the situation. Right. It's very
things can happen. It's just that we're not going to have ISIS.
Yeah.
But we could have, so this is where the risk comes. Every single high position in the military is evil. Like the solution is really like, we need to deal with these people. And it's probably, several thousand of people in the country that are real dangers. So we have that. We have the Cubans. The Cubans are so infiltrated that most of the casualties of this extraction were Cuban agents, as you know. 32 Cuban agents died in the military operation. Yeah. The Cuban government had been saying for decades, we have no troops in Venezuela. Oh, and then they announced 32 of their men died. What were they doing? Yeah. Were they the gay lovers of Maduro, 32?
Yeah.
Maybe one, but not 32.
Well, do you think, so again, whenever it comes to analyzing whether or not an incoming administration is going to have the support of the military or law enforcement, one of the things that I highlighted and my assessment of best worst case scenarios was whatever happens next, the new administration has to be able to pay the military and law enforcement, because if they can't get pay there, they don't even need to be ideologically motivated. If it's about a question of I feed my family fighting with the, for the cartel or working for the cartel, or I feed my family fighting for the government, that might be as simple as the decision as it is, but you have to get in there and make sure that you can continue the paychecks. And right now, as we know, Maduro's paying a lot of his military through drug running, not through oil revenue or legitimate taxation or things of that nature. So
That's right.
do you think it's one of those things where the senior military leadership that was brought in by Chavez, brought in by Maduro, essentially for no other purpose than to be loyal to the regime, right? They're not there for their competence or their expertise. They're there for loyalty to the regime. Do you think it's possible to isolate and extricate those guys while not completely gutting what you will need to effectively manage the military as an effective internal security force?
That is a question that I've asked myself. I am of the belief that all the generals have to go.
Mm.
That doesn't mean that they have to go to prison. That just means that they can't be generals because they were drug dealers. They cannot be trusted. And they know, and this is, by the way, this is why a coup will never happen in Venezuela. They know that if Venezuela becomes democratic, you cannot be a drug dealer as a general.
Yeah.
Right? Because it's
but
not about politics. The Venezuelan people will never vote for that.
But here's the question, right? Like, so if all of your senior military commanders essentially know that they're on the outs, they're gone, and they think that being gone most likely means they're getting tried, convicted of drug trafficking or other crimes, does that incentivize?
No, we are going to there. It is pretty well understood that there's going to be an amnesty.
Okay.
And actually, Secretary Rubio said it this morning.
Yeah. Okay, I didn't catch that.
There's going to be a reconciliation process. What does that mean, amnesty? And Maria Corina, the opposition leader, has also said so.
Yeah.
Not because it's what we desire.
Yeah.
It's because it's what we need to achieve liberty, which is the paramount goal.
Well, and that's the part that I really appreciate about. So you mentioned that's the part that I appreciate about this, because what it signifies to me is that it's the understanding that, yes, in an ideal world, everybody would be properly tried for their crimes and whatnot. But in the real world that we occupy, if you do that, you've basically just told every general, hey, go run as far as you can to the north or wherever else, the south, wherever else you need to.
That's right.
Consolidate as much money, munitions, everything you can. Link up with the various rebels working on the border, and that's what you do now, because it's the only way that you're going to avoid prisoner execution.
And that is a risk. By the way, I think that it's key for this transition to be successful that the communists lose the election happening in a few months in Colombia. Mm-hmm. Because Colombia, if it stays under the current type of government, Petro is not going to be president anymore, but he has an endorsed candidate. If that guy wins, they are going to be a destabilizing force through FARC and ELN, the rebel groups that you mean.
Yeah.
But if they lose, we will have a very important partner right there that won't give us more trouble. So how I see it is, look, the regime has now an opportunity. Everybody in senior leadership, Delcy, let me tell you about who we're talking about.
Please.
The people in charge of Venezuela right now, it's not the vice president. That's not true. That's what the news says, because everybody cares about titles. Titles mean nothing in Venezuela. The titles are for decoration. In the Constitution is a picture. It's nothing. Venezuela stopped being a one-man dictatorship when Chavez died, and it became an oligarchy.
Okay.
It's not like Iraq, where Saddam Hussein he made all the choices. That's because Saddam was like Chavez. They were pals, actually. They were very good friends of each other. Mm. But when Chavez died, it became almost like an executive council of the people around him that have been with him since the start. Everybody in senior leadership has been in the government since 1999. Delcy and her brother Jorge. Delcy, in name only, is the VP. Jorge is the president of Congress. Diosdado Cabello, I don't think he has maybe he's minister of something, but he's the richest man in Venezuela. Then we have, Nicolas and Celia that are arrested, him and his wife. They are independently powerful, by the way. Celia is not that she's the wife. No. Celia came independently to government. She's just as powerful as Maduro.
Okay.
And then we have Vladimir. He's the Minister of Defense. Their background: Jorge and Delcy are the children of a Marxist terrorist who was already a Marxist terrorist in the 70s and got killed by the Venezuelan police for kidnapping an American CEO and holding him hostage for 3 years of his life.
Yeah.
So they are rotten from the start. Then Vladimir, think about Vladimir Padrino Lopez, the Minister of Defense. Why do you think his name is Vladimir? He's not Russian descent.
Yeah.
He's not Russian descent.
Yeah.
It's because of Lenin.
Yeah.
So all these people are the worst of the worst. They have a chance now. This is what I imagine Secretary Rubio is negotiating. They can keep all their money, they can keep their freedom, and they can retire in a foreign dictatorship. In exchange for allowing an orderly transition where we're going to liberate the political prisoners. That's also something Rubio said today.
Yeah.
And we're going to allow the opposition leaders back into the country, Maria Corina, Edmundo, everybody else. And we're going to hold free and fair elections. That is the chance they have. And if not, then there's going to be more military operations.
Okay. So, I mean, and again, that's one of those things where some people will probably be frustrated about people not being prosecuted, but with respect to real politics, it kind of makes sense for the situation if you want to guarantee, because otherwise you're turning people into rebel leaders with a lot of resources. So let me ask you this. This was another concern, and that is one of the things that I brought up. I said, in the best case scenario, whatever government gets initially established in order to run things, let's just say that theoretically they get things up and running, the military remains loyalty, the police remains loyalty. There's no significant resistance group that causes a lot of problems. That doesn't mean you can't have a breakdown, because right now you have a lot of anti-Maduro forces, but all of a sudden when it's a question of who's actually going to run the place, look at the conservative movement within the United States, right? We're constantly fighting amongst ourselves. So here's the question: down in Venezuela, there's been some concerns with, some of the anti-Maduro forces where it's like, okay, they may be anti-Maduro. That doesn't mean they're not cozy with socialism on some level. It doesn't mean they're not left of center. So what are some of the concerns there, both within more of the left of center groups that, again, might have been anti-Maduro, but are not anti-leftist, or some of the groups on the right that could see this as an opportunity to vie for power in order to control the country?
So, okay. So until a couple years ago, I would have said that was a problem. The opposition was infiltrated. And so that you understand the level of infiltration, the guy who ran for president against Chavez in the year 2000, today is a part of the regime.
Got it.
Like he was on the take the whole time. The guy who ran against Chavez in 2006 and the other guy in 2012, 3 presidential candidates straight that we supported, that we thought were on our side, were all on the take.
Okay. Got it.
Okay.
So that's real controlled opposition.
Really? But this is how Maria Corina, the current leader, became popular. Let me tell you about Maria Corina. Maria Corina was a radical from the start. She was an election integrity activist. She said the elections were rigged from the start and everybody thought she was crazy. Turns out, I know that this has a lot of Americans talking about it and stuff, but in our case, it's like, this is real. Like, this is not a conspiracy. I mean it. Their elections were rigged.
Yeah. Rigged in a way we can barely imagine.
Right. I don't mean rigged in like they changed the law, but like that. I mean like they just make up the numbers now.
Yeah.
So Maria Corina did that. She was very pro-free market. I mean, she ran for president and her campaign was literally capitalism. That was the phrase.
Wow.
She has read Hayek, Friedman. She paid for her party staff to do educational certificate programs on classical liberalism.
Okay, this is a former radical
run by the Atlas Network.
Oh my
the Atlas Network collaborates with all of this, and all of them go to the conference. She has known Milei since Milei was a nobody. They're
Okay, and
friends.
to give everyone an idea that when you say free markets, that can mean a lot of things. When you say capitalism, when you say Atlas, now you're talking like Austrian school, like hardcore
Yes,
free
yes,
market. Yeah,
she's like that. So she was hated by the rest of the opposition because she was not a socialist light.
yeah.
She ran for Congress. She became actually my congresswoman when I was a kid. And then they barred her. They kicked her out of parliament. They hit her in the face, everything you can imagine. And as everybody else was proven to be a squish, a socialist on the take, even Guaido, and Guaido was not on the take, but he just was not successful. And she was the first one to call for U.S. military intervention too.
Yeah.
And that's kind of how she became popular. Then Venezuelans organized internal primaries to run for president in 2024. She was against the idea of running for the election, but she ended up doing this just because she wanted to prove to the world through the technology that she developed, which is really impressive, that the elections were rigged. Okay. And she achieved it. So I tip my hat off. I was against participating.
It was her technology that was being used to challenge the government's numbers in 2024.
Yes. I thought it was all useless, to be honest. I was against the idea of participating because I thought it was illegitimate. And I have to say I was wrong and she was right.
Yeah.
We organized first before the actual election for president, actual primaries. And in the primaries, Nick, this was not for us. She won with 92% of the vote. 92.
That's nuts.
Like, how do you win with 92? And the other opposition squishes ran.
Yeah.
And there's no campaign. There's no money. It was all literally walking in the street on social media. She's not even allowed to take flights. She had to take a car. And she won with 92% the primary. Then the election happens. And the election, by the way, which is also rigged because the government controls all the media. The government pays government workers to vote for them and pays them if they show you that they voted for the president, for Maduro. And if you show them the picture. And so Venezuelans are very economically desperate, Nick.
Yeah.
And so in that circumstance of economic desperation, of government control of everything, the government didn't get 30% of the vote.
Yeah.
And that's barring everybody outside Venezuela from voting.
So
right?
so that does a couple of things, right? So one, it addresses the question of whether or not the Venezuelan people, if there really is like an absolute critical mass of Venezuelan people.
I would say if you ask me to tell you how many people support the government, it's under 10% of the population, most of whom are elderly. Brainwashed.
Okay, so here's the question. Here's the question then, right? Because this is something that's going to pop up. If that's true, why did they need us to take out Maduro? Ladies and gentlemen, I've said it once and I will say it again. How your kids get educated matters. And education is not just a room they go to. It's not just a schoolhouse. No, it's everything they do. It's all of the various information that they take in. It's the shows they watch, the music they listen to. It's the books they read. And over at Brave Books, you can be guaranteed that you are going to get pro-God, pro-American, patriotic books that actually reinforce the sort of themes that we want our kids to see. We want them to see courage. We want them to see honesty, truth. We want them to grow into the sort of people that can be godly men and women, godly husbands and wives, and godly mothers and fathers. And Brave Books is here to help. Plus, if you go to bravebooks.com/Nick and you use my code Nick, you're going to get 20% off your first order. So make it a big one. Make it a big order. Get the full value of that 20%. Not only that, but here's something that I think is especially interesting. If you join the Brave Book Club, you're going to get a new book every month and free access to their parent-vetted streaming platform, Brave Plus. This is a time, it's more important than ever that we be careful as parents on what sort of information, knowledge, and entertainment we give our young children access to. So if you want one that is going to respect the values that you were trying to raise your kids with, go over to Brave Books. Once again, that's bravebooks.com/Nick. Use my code Nick and get 20% off that first order. Go check them out.
That's very good. And that's very simple. You will understand it because the civilians are unarmed.
Okay. Yeah.
And they literally will kill them. and arrest
So
them.
as all socialist dictators do, they disarm their population and then ensure that the military is completely beholden to them for their livelihood. Okay. All right. So if we do have that critical mass within the population that is absolutely supportive of Maduro being gone, if we do have a leader in exile that we're able to take back to be a part of this kind of interim government before elections are held, that the people support and trust.
Well,
If
the
we,
interim government is not going to be her. It's the current regime.
yeah. Well, that's what Rodriguez, right?
Right.
Okay. But she's still going to be
She's
a
just
very
going to run for president.
she's going to be a very
here.
formative figure within that entire process. But see, that also creates a question of, okay, if Rodriguez, since he was the one that was essentially permitted to run and won the last election, even though Maduro stole it, is there going to be problems there with Rodriguez running against her in a future election?
No, I mean, like, if that's part of the deal, sure, but like, Nick, she wouldn't get 5% of the vote, Delcy.
Okay.
Like, I don't think they won't attempt to run and stay in the country. She will probably leave with her money.
Oh, no. I'm okay. That's not who I was talking. I was talking about Corina coming. Like,
Corina,
you're saying that
but who would run against Maria Corina?
Okay, so that's really what it is. I mean,
there's a bunch of other like fake opposition leaders who may run, but she would win in a landslide. Like, there's nobody else in Venezuela. Maybe only if Donald Trump himself ran would anybody be able to compete with Maria Corina.
So let me see if I can understand this properly. The initial interim government that will be set up, Rodriguez, right? And then
that's what the United States government has decided.
Yes. And that's, again, that is interim until the next election cycle, which presumably is going to try to take place on schedule.
No, there's no schedule. I mean, it's all fake. I mean, the government rigged the election that was supposed to be 2024. Are we going to wait until 2030 until Trump is out of office?
I guess what I'm saying though is whatever interim government goes in, right? There's this question of when do you hold the next elections in order to get past this idea that this is just a puppet government of the United States or whatnot. And presumably Corina would run in that.
Exactly. And that has to take place. If this is going to be successful, the entire process needs to happen during Trump's presidency. Okay. Because the Maduro regime in power, the thugs, know they're only afraid of Trump because they know only he has the guts to do what they did to Maduro. So
I guess the point I'm asking about is regular schedule. I'm saying currently right now it's 6-year presidential terms, correct?
Well, if you want to follow the farce of the Venezuelan constitution, if you want to follow that farce, technically the vice president, after the president is arrested or killed or whatever happens to him, their Congress is supposed to declare absolute absence of the presidents. Okay. I think that they must do it after a certain number of days, and then the president has a certain number of days, I think it's 2 months, to call for elections. Okay. All right. So theoretically, what I'm trying to do here is I'm trying to say that again, whenever you're coming in and you're now replacing something with something else, to the extent that you can keep certain schedules, patterns, behaviors, traditions in line, you're more likely to add legitimacy to that process than if you're just completely interrupting it. Even if you don't like what Chavez did, if people got used to it over the last 20, plus 30 years, then that's the question I'm asking in my mind. But maybe it's not relevant. So I would say it's not relevant. I think the only question that's relevant is how to maintain a grip of the security forces. Okay, so let's do this. So we've addressed that. Yes, the Venezuelan people on the ground are overwhelmingly supportive of Maduro being gone. Yes, they would be open to U.S. military involvement, U.S. military presence. Yes, open to Rodriguez coming back and running essentially kind of an interim government until the next set of elections could be held. Here's my question. This goes to what you just said about security forces. If obviously socialists going to socialist, right? They haven't done any new infrastructure or building of the oil industry since it was officially nationalized in 76. That's right.
Okay, so in 76, so a great deal of disrepair. It was
nationalized in 76, but in the early 90s, before Chavez became president, they
Yeah.
reopened it to full private investment. So we had a
Okay.
huge increase in production in the 90s. And then it was Chavez came in, and then it was all destroyed.
Okay. So here's one of the biggest concerns I have is that when you look at the Venezuelan economy, oil was it. The only reason why Chavez got away doing with what he did was because the price of oil shot up exponentially almost very soon after he took office. And then when it tanked, so too did his economy. And you saw the inflation and everything else, which just decimated it. But what that also means is that there's been a lot of disrepair within the oil rigs all along the river basin. And that's why there was such this heavy reliance on narcotics trafficking in order to fund the military, fund the police, and everything else. And so the question is, okay, well, we're not going to go in there and engage in narcotics trafficking in order to fund the military, but the oil industry is not where it needs to be in order to fund it right now. So the question is, does the United States, and perhaps with other outside forces, I know Javier Milei has expressed that Argentina is interested in making sure that Venezuela has a free government. Does the United States on the hook initially for keeping the funds going to fund law enforcement and the military so it remains loyal to the government? And is that done in the form of like a loan until we can get the oil infrastructure up to a point where now oil can sustain the funds necessary for the military and law enforcement?
So excellent. This is the smartest conversation I've had about this. Thank you. So the Department of Energy just released an announcement today, Secretary Wright, on this. I think this is why the Rubio plan includes recovery of the oil sector before the transition.
Okay.
Because they want to set them up for success.
Yes. That's smart.
They just announced that the Americans are going to go in to repair the electric grid. They announced that they are relieving the sanctions and sending American company experts to fix the oil infrastructure. So you see the issue. Venezuela produces overwhelmingly only heavy crude.
Yeah.
Heavy crude to be even exported needs light crude that they were bringing from Iran and Russia. Very little of it. And now with sanctions, it's impossible. And Venezuela was selling its oil. I mean, this was all to steal, but we would still need more revenue to run the country. It was selling it at a 20 or 30% discount on the price because of the sanctions.
Yeah.
The U.S. is now going to guarantee that the sales happen in the U.S. all lawfully, no Russian ships, no Iranian, no terrorists, at full market price. So that already increases the Venezuelan revenue by that 20, 30% gap.
Okay.
Uses American light crude, which is much better than using the Russian, the Iranian, that is also, farther away, all that. So better for America too. Mm-hmm. And then they're going to repair the electric sector so that the oil can get pumping. Because oil, turns out, you require a lot of energy to even produce energy. All of the things are connected. Venezuela used to get almost all its electricity from one hydroelectric plant that when it was built, it was the largest in the planet. You can see it from space. You should go to Google Maps and look up at this huge lake in the middle east side of Venezuela.
That's the hydroelectric dam there, which I think is still to this day like the 5th or 6th biggest in the world.
Yes, it's the Guri Dam. Imagine, Venezuela was such a great country.
Yeah.
We imagine how good for also the energy sector was. You produce all your electricity through hydroelectric, and then you get to export more oil because you don't burn it.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's not because of environmental reasons. It's because of economic smarts.
Yeah.
And so that is what they're going to repair. Now, how do you fund it? I mean, as soon as Venezuela becomes democratic, there's going to be an IMF funding package.
Yeah.
The IMF is going to release all the funds that are frozen right now because it's not recognized, the government. All the stolen and frozen funds in foreign accounts in the US, Switzerland, and the UK, it's going to be able to be released. Yeah. The World Bank and humanitarian organizations are going to be able to do a lot of the work that the government will eventually take care of, which is the humanitarian work immediately, right? Yeah. It's not like the government's going to have the money to pay for, the food of so many people who are starving. It's that we're going to have the Red Cross coming in and the Catholic Church that is prohibited right now. Yeah. And so the quality of life of the average Venezuelan is going to see an immediate increase.
So that's critical. That I like. One of my biggest concerns with all of this is that, The joke is, or not the joke, but the story is you're 9 meals away from revolution, right? You're 9 meals away, and so it's this idea that as bad as things are, if everything is interrupted significantly, you push people to the brink where again they go to wherever they can be fed, and they work for whoever can feed them. And so again, what you're saying here is that you're thinking that because of the way the conditions were and the restrictions that were put on, and the fact that Red Cross, Catholic Church, other outside entities, not to mention the fact that there's like an 8 million Venezuelan diaspora that
Nearly
um
9. And imagine the
yeah.
capital flows from the diaspora into
And
the
that's like a
country.
third of the population
It's a
of
third.
Venezuela.
Imagine
Yeah.
how many people would go back. Certainly a couple million would
Yeah.
go back to Venezuela once it's free. So that's a big injection to the
Mm.
economy. And then the capital flows because now you're going to be able to move capital more safely, the investment opportunities. You know how much is real estate right now in Venezuela? That's why the jokes on Twitter are about that you can buy a beachfront apartment
Yeah.
in the best places for $10,000.
Well, and that's going to be one of the other concerns is it's both a good thing and a thing that can potentially cause unrest, right? Because you absolutely have to have foreign investment in Venezuela in order to get your economy running again. And there's going to be a lot of people that look, I would love to go to Venezuela, right? It is for all intents, it's a beautiful country. It's in a beautiful place. There's no reason why Venezuela shouldn't be an absolute safe, secure economic powerhouse in the Caribbean, right?
That's right.
But what it also leads to is that you're going to have people that are going to say, okay, we're going to come down here, we're going to buy up all of this property, and that potentially becomes problematic as well. And so,
So
I-
that is a
I-
good point. Maria
yeah,
Corina, the opposition leader, has a plan for that. So first,
okay,
number one, we have to understand that actually from a legitimacy perspective, it's probably better to have foreign investment than
mhm,
anything else
yeah,
because the Venezuelans who are wealthy in Venezuela are evil crooks.
yeah,
So
yeah,
I actually prefer the foreigners over the Venezuelans
yeah. Well, and
because
I
you are
think
going to be assured that they're legitimate.
well, and like you said before, the idea that you have such a large diaspora, and there's many within that diaspora that have done very, very well. Like they're not just coming back to buy a property; they're coming back to reestablish businesses,
That's
to
right.
to take things up in a way that they haven't been
So
permitted to do so.
but because the government has nationalized so much of the economy, right, including
Mhm.
oil.
Yeah,
So the plan that Maria Corina laid out, actually, it's written. I think it's Venezuela, land of grace and prosperity, something like that. It's all about privatization, but how do you privatize it? It's gonna essentially give shares to the population,
hmm,
and the population will be able to, in a safeguarded process, to sell it and profit from the privatization process directly.
yeah. Okay,
Uh, so that is important. I think that that's very valuable.
okay. So all right. So basically, what we're looking at here is there is a mechanism in place to pay security forces. There is popular support for the removal of Maduro and an incoming government. There is a mechanism for foreign investment to immediately re-engage. It's the idea of not doing the full transition until the oil industry is up and running, which again I think makes perfect sense for practical reasons. Okay, let's look at, and as we said before, there's a mechanism in place to provide an incentive to those who, have been exploiting the people, have been exploiting the economy to leave, as opposed to staying, getting tried, getting imprisoned.
That
And
is important, though.
yeah,
It's important that they leave the country so that we
yes,
guarantee there is not a future coup.
yeah, yeah, absolutely. So this is going to be my next question. Okay, let's say all of that goes off without a hitch. I mean, that's a lot, right? There's going to be some bumps along the way, but that plan makes sense to me. That plan seems to take in the various practical considerations that in much cases has been lacking in other operations like this in the past. Um, with all that said, there's still going to be, because again, there's been rebels fighting in Venezuela forever, and just like we don't have to deal with Islam or that kind of religiously motivated terrorism. We do have to deal with the fact that Central and South America, Latin America, has a relationship with socialism and communism that is essentially foreign in North America. I mean, parts of Mexico maybe, but U.S. and Canada, communism has always been a bad word. And as excited as I am by the elections of people like Javier Milei or the recent elections in Chile, I always keep in mind that the second biggest vote getter was the member of the Communist Party. And so there is a comfort with socialism and communism in Latin America that we don't see in the United States. And so we have to contend with that. What do you anticipate, to the extent, how many people in the military, and I know this is a hard question to ask, right? But give me your best estimate. How many people in the military, in Chavez's Bolivarian militia, how many of those guys do you see picking up their rifles and joining rebel groups like, and not even rebel, right? Cartel groups. Some of them ideologically motivate them. Some of them just motivated by making money.
And they're already gangs. I mean, Tren de Aragua. Remember Tren de Aragua?
Yeah.
That exists already.
Yeah.
They already are causing trouble. That's not even the funny thing about this is that wouldn't be new.
Yeah. Do you see their ranks growing? And again, and it's taking with them. Like I one of the things that I stressed when we talked about this is like, look, I don't care how many T-72s the Venezuelan military has, right? And anybody that wants to fight against Americans knows that you don't want T-72s. What you want are the sort of things that can do damage in a way that can pick up interest with the American media, right? You plop yourself in a T-72, we just kill you right away because you're easy to identify and you're gone. But you take one of these, Russian manpads, and now you just bide your time and you wait to take out a Chinook full of U.S. service members. That's front page news, on New York Times and everything else. Because the other thing that a rebel group is going to understand is your job is not to defeat the American military. Your job is to create enough problems within the American press so that Republicans lose in the midterms, so that whoever, J.D. Vance doesn't win the next election. That's what their goal is. So my question is how many, as we look at the militia, as we look at the military in Venezuela.
So, there's several groups, so that you understand that there are groups. The Bolivarian militia is a fake thing. It's a bunch of old people who have fake guns. They are worthless. The collectivos, those are motorcycle gangs that are armed. They're a problem. Tren de Aragua, a problem, criminal organization. And then the FARC-CARNIA-LAN, which are Colombian and only operate in the border regions, they're a problem. So do I expect the ranks of these organizations to grow? Yes. Do I expect it to be worse than it already is with the regime? No.
Okay.
I still think it would be a huge net improvement for Venezuelans. You have to understand, you mentioned the armed guerrilla groups. Venezuela didn't have an armed guerrilla group because Venezuela pacified its guerrillas in the 60s.
Yeah.
The only guerrilla group came from Colombia.
Yeah.
And I do expect that to grow, which is why I think it's so important that the Colombians win that election, the right, because we need somebody like Uribe to pacify those guerrillas in Colombia so that we have no problem. Otherwise, we are going to have a problem. If you ask me what would be the ideal situation so that we stop any sort of potential armed groups, I do think that it would be ideal if we had foreign troops in Venezuela. With foreign troops, I don't mean American troops, actually.
So what troops do you mean?
Latin American troops. Like the Dominican Republic, the president of the Dominican Republic put out a tweet after the Maduro capture, the day after, saying that he volunteers the Dominican Republic to reestablish the peace, he said, in Venezuela.
Yeah. I mean, they're not going to...
administration. Yeah.
I mean, the amount of troops that Dominican Republic would be able to deploy would be...
It's because it's not just the DR, it's also Argentina.
Well, that's what I'm asking. Because if you have commitments from places like Argentina and Chile, you actually have sizable countries with sizable militaries and professional militaries.
Spanish-speaking militaries.
Yes.
Which is key, right? This is why I meant no American, not because I'm against the Americans. I mean, if the Americans want to do it, look, we'll make them arepas. There's jokes on social media about them. The women are like, they're offering themselves to the American soldiers.
Well, I joke, my son is in the 101st Airborne Division. He's an infantryman. And I was like, well, buddy, you might get a Venezuelan wife. And again, really? I didn't mean that as an insult. I meant it more as like,
it would happen. Yeah. So, but what I'm trying to say, but the Spanish part is important to actually be successful on the ground.
Yeah.
And and it would also avoid the political cost of that in the US. And I think the Trump administration can easily incentivize these countries to commit to an international force, because all the countries in Latin America are happy about this happening.
Even Brazil?
Well, Lula is different. Lula is on the take.
Yeah. Lula should be in jail.
Yes.
Well, and again, one of the things that's exciting about this, especially if you see this election turnaround in Colombia as well, is that if you would have told me, like, Bolivia and Peru would be electing right-wing governments, I was like, you got to be kidding me. Like Bolivia, I think Bolivia has set a world record for the number of coups it's had within its existence. But so, okay, let's run through that scenario for a second, because that is an important component of this. There are so many people that are supportive of the Trump administration that are very leery of, once again, the United States military having to do the heavy lifting. And if you're a rebel that has watched the news for the last 2 decades, again, you've realized what GUP realized in the Vietnam War. You don't beat the Americans in the field; you beat them in the media. And so,
Right.
again, they don't have to win any pitched battles. That would be the dumbest thing they could attempt to do. They just have to do this little nitpick war of attrition over time. Now, one of the things I said was, like, to the extent that U.S. forces will need to be involved. And I looked at it from 2 sides on the best case scenario. I said, look, you may have to have some forces deployed in order to secure the oil infrastructure, because if you're going to repair all of that, and again, you're dealing with smart rebels who recognize that there's no funding the military outside of foreign
I don't
expenditures.
think that the rebels are going to attack any of the people helping with the oil and all that, because it's just that Trump has been very effective with the deterrent effect.
Yeah.
I think they know they would be obliterated by Trump in an airstrike.
Well, okay, but here's what I'll say on this. Like, air power is
Okay.
a wonderful thing. You absolutely need it. But we airstruck the living hell out of the Taliban in terrain that was arguably not as difficult as some of the terrain we would be contending with in Venezuela. I'm not talking about where the oil is. I'm talking about where they
True.
go back and actually operate their safe
But
haven.
the Taliban are a religious war, Nick.
No,
This is different.
well, and this is the part that I'm wondering, right? Because, again, you're right. The FARC are not necessarily religiously motivated. They're Marxists, right? They may have some sort of weird liberation theology to combine with it, but they're Marxists.
And they
And
just want to
yet,
make money.
well, yeah, and yet they've been operating for decades, right? So these organizations have managed to successfully survive through a variety of tactics, and a lot of it has been because they retreat back to easily defensible terrain that's incredibly hard to strike, even with
Right.
with overwhelming air power. So unless you're willing to go down there and carpet bomb the jungle, right, with
Right.
Agent
Yeah.
Orange, right, that's not going to happen. So that's the only part that I say it's not about it. The theory I put out there was, if you had enough forces to secure the oil to where you can eliminate, because there's going to have to be some security, where you can eliminate the concern of anybody
Yeah.
interfering with operations to bring oil back online. And then the other thing I would have said is, I said, look, we don't need tens of thousands of American infantrymen, but 7th Special Forces Group, I mean, you got Green Berets, Latin America's their area. You've got a lot of Spanish speakers on those teams. And the whole purpose of Special Forces is by, through, and with. We do counterinsurgency, unconventional warfare, counterterrorism, foreign internal defense. Like when I wasn't in Iraq as a Green Beret, because I had Asia, when I wasn't in Iraq, I was training in Korean Special Missions Group, or I was training Bangladeshi border guards. 7th Special
Wow.
Forces Group is already down right now training, militaries in friendly nations. That's part of what we do
No,
as Green
I
Berets.
have a friend. I have a friend deployed in Southcom.
Yeah.
And
And so I was
know
like,
about
Green
that.
Berets embedded, because the way our model works, this would be a counterinsurgency model. You'd be fighting against any potential rebel or resistance groups. A 12-man ODA can be responsible for advising, training, and assisting a 500-man indigenous battalion. That's a good ratio. That's a good ratio.
That is
So
very interesting.
yeah, so you still have.
So what you're saying is that some U.S. Special Forces could go to train the good forces.
Yeah. You go down there, and what it ends up doing is, one, it fosters a good, close working relationship between the United States military and a host nation force. In this case, it would be the new legitimate government of Venezuela. And SF would go in and they would embed with, like say a Venezuelan infantry battalion, and they would provide, training, advising, assistance. They would be the ones. So for instance, if you wanted US naval or air support, right? It makes a lot of sense to have a seventh group guy in there that's communicating with US assets that could come in and do the strike. So now what you do is you have the Venezuelan military conducting operations under this new government, but they've got support from America in the form of air support, but you also have Americans on the ground helping to call the strikes, helping to do it. That is a troop deployment that I, as an American that doesn't want a ton of American military, that was one I'd look at and be like, that makes sense.
Okay.
Um,
Interesting to know.
Yeah.
Because something I've heard that is being discussed is the use of private contractors.
Mhm.
I mean, it's something that Eric Prince has wanted to do. He had this whole project that, he fundraised some money. It's a little controversial, to be honest, among Venezuelans, this one, because they donated money and nothing has come out of it.
Yeah.
But maybe it will. Maybe it will, and I'm wrong. And they're wrong too. And so, the use of those private, I guess, I don't know if mercenary is the word or what.
Well, it's so there's the way I've always kind of made the distinction, because mercenary has this negative connotation as just a gun for hire, right? And now, again, maybe it falls within the broader umbrella of the term, but we also have to understand there's a spectrum there. There's a I will, have gun, will travel, and then there's the yes, I work for a private military company or a private defense contractor, but I only operate within certain boundaries, right? Like I only operate if there's U.S. government approval of the operation. I only operate under these rules of engagement, escalation of force criteria, which puts it on par with what we would expect out of a U.S. military unit. So for the people that want to like chalk up every single private military company as you're just a bunch of mercenaries, I don't think they really know what they're talking about. But I also understand the concern, because it's a question of, okay, who's who? But you could definitely see a situation where a private military firm would be used to go down there and provide security in certain areas.
And my understanding is that that's part of the plan.
Yeah.
And I think that would be probably beneficial.
It's not a bad plan, provided that it's again, it's run within certain criteria. And Eric Prince knows how to run it within that criteria.
Right.
But it takes out the political danger of deploying U.S. forces. It doesn't have the same concern with the American voter,
and really guarantees the safety of the new government, I think. So that's my understanding is how this works. I mean, look, but this can go in a different way. The current interim regime that's still in power, they could just choose not to do what the United States says, and then the United States needs to force them to say that they're not bluffing again, and that means another strike.
Right? Well, and that's what we want to avoid, because again, I can't stress this enough. This is not about the United States not about the United States government's ability to project military and economic strength. Donald Trump, one of the things I admire most about the Trump administration is that he has recognized that, deploying the U.S. military doesn't mean we have to get into a 20-year nation building exercise to create parliamentary democracies in Islamist countries, right? Sometimes it could just mean we show up, kick the living hell out of you, and we leave, right? That's what we did with Iran. But in this case, there is going to need to be more focus. Now, I'm very impressed
because if you want the oil, because the truth is that if you want to increase oil production from Venezuela, that's not going to happen with this regime in power.
No,
because as soon as Trump is out of office, they're going to seize the whatever investments were made.
Oh yeah, if we lose the midterms, that's going to have consequences right off the bat. Because now, again, there's still ways that Trump can work that. He won't be able to work it with U.S. forces with the same way that he currently could.
This is why I think that needs to be done this year.
Yeah. Oh, I agree with you. I think, well, so let me ask you this. Realistically, because again, one of the things we want is for Venezuelans who want to return home to be able to come home and help with the rebuilding process. It's also going to be, the diaspora is also going to be people that vote the right way in those elections. And they're going to have the money to be able to invest to get the economy going.
We will be able to vote abroad, by the way.
That's true. Yeah. So let me ask you this. How What do you think would be an ideal timeline for things to ideal timeline to where you and I can get back on a podcast
Yeah.
next November and say, my gosh, textbook example of how to do it right. What would you say is the
Okay.
timeline you'd like to see?
I would like to see elections take place or be held this year.
Okay.
Sorry, take place or be called, already be scheduled. Like, we need to have an announcement by the current regime that there will be free elections this year. I would like to see the political prisoners released in this month.
Okay.
That's an important sign of goodwill.
Yeah. Yeah.
If they're not even able to release the freaking 500 people they have in a prison that are not military people, threatened terrorists, they're literally just going to be with their families, then they're not playing with us.
Okay. How quick do the bad guys you mentioned have to be out of country?
Well, when after the new government takes office, or in that process, when that happens, yes.
So you're talking about a lot
of this needs to get done in the next 3 years during the Trump administration.
Yeah. But again, it's this idea that the longer. So again, obviously, you have certain essential services that if they just stop running, all of a sudden, you create yourself problems. And so I guess the question I'm asking is for there's tiers here, right? You got the guys at the tippy top level that are just bad dudes that need to be gone sooner rather than later. You got other people that, okay, maybe there's problems there, but they're problems you can live with in order to keep essential services going.
Oh, yeah, no, the essential services and all that, all those people are staying.
Okay, but before we were talking about some of the senior generals, some of the senior.
Yeah, it's only in the military, but not in the electric sector. All that. I mean,
yeah,
that's run by public employees that might be incompetent or whatever. But
how quick do the senior generals need to be gone? Is this like you need to be out within this month?
Yeah, no, I wouldn't say this month. I would say that they will need to be gone alongside the top leadership.
Okay.
Yeah, that's a good question. I'm not really sure what the decision should be.
How long do you think it takes? And again, this may be kind of outside your specific knowledge of the oil industry or whatnot, but how long do you think it reasonably takes to be able to get kind of the oil sector like functioning or on its way?
A very good expert. So the foremost expert on this, his name is Francisco Monaldi. He's a Venezuelan economist in actually Texas. Who has done so many interviews, but he's actually the one who developed the plan to recover the sector.
Okay.
So he's in the weeds with the opposition.
Yeah.
And he says, like, the norm, really, if you want to go back to pre-Chavismo levels of oil production, given current prices, given the situation on the ground, it's going to take 10 years to get to 4 million barrels a day.
Okay. Well, but part of, again, I look at that. There's a difference between capacity and capability and what the market will allow, right? Like, again, you're not gonna pump out barrels at a loss, right? So the question is, does he think it takes 10 years to get to that sort of pre-Chavez capacity and capability?
Because of the current price level and projection.
Yeah.
Unless there was an increase in oil prices, in which case it would become more profitable.
Okay.
That's what he says, especially because of also the electric sector situation. So unless the United States does an incredible job, that like you have the Americans come in and fix electricity and like they are like incredible and they do an incredible investment very quickly, you're not going to be pumping out that much. But think about it. Right now, they're not pumping out 1 million even.
Yeah.
So within a couple of years, you can get to 2 million for sure.
Okay.
But to get to 4, it becomes increasingly difficult the more you increase it.
Yeah, but I guess that question's important simply because it's going to end up becoming, you don't want your country dependent upon the IMF or loans from other country. You want it to be able to operate off of its own steam. And that's kind of the important question is if oil is obviously going to be one of the primary ways that Venezuela does that. How long does this take to start becoming?
You have to remember, Venezuela also now has remittances as a source of income that it didn't used to have before.
Yeah.
Venezuela would become a great investment opportunity in other sectors that are repressed. Right.
What other? I mean, I know minerals are big, agriculture. What are some other areas that you see as something that's easier to develop right now because
tourism would happen immediately. We have no tourism now because it's a dangerous country. It's undemocratic. Americans get arrested. You would get an immediate inflow of tourism that doesn't need any change.
Yeah.
You would have a big inflow of money just for regular businesses that you can't do anything yet.
Yeah.
Like if people wanted to open a restaurant or something, remember, people don't have, you can't have normal private property because of the regime.
Yeah.
So the positive case of Venezuela is like Poland, right? It's like Eastern Europe. A lot of people try to compare it to like Iraq, right? But in reality, Venezuela is more like the Marxist version, Catholic country that is united against this regime because of learned experience.
Yeah.
And I see it as a Poland, really.
So, all right, but you think that what are some things initially? What are some things initially that we can all look at in the next few months where we can say, okay, things are moving in the right direction?
Yes, release of political prisoners. That's number one.
Yeah.
I would say having Americans go in to actually touch, oil infrastructure. Having American companies cooperate in that. I would say you stop seeing the high level of repression that you're seeing right now, which is the colectivos patrolling the streets, like things normalize, the street normalizing.
Got it.
That's what I would see in the next couple of months as immediate.
I think I'll tell you another one too that I would like to see is that obviously we kind of want to see what people on the ground in Venezuela think about this. So the
media.
When I say freedom of the press, I don't mean the state-run media, right? I mean more like I think it would be highly encouraging if the Venezuelan people had access to the internet and the ability to communicate with people internationally in a way that
Did you see what Elon Musk just did?
Yes, with Starlink. Yeah. I think that's going to be huge because it's going to give Americans an idea of what's actually going on the ground, and it's going to be interesting to watch a bunch of Marxist leftist baristas in New York City tell Venezuelans what they're really feeling about Maduro being gone, as they're so prone to do. Well, listen, Daniel, I know you've been really, really busy, and I appreciate you giving some time to us. Tell people where they can find you and follow you on social media.
Yes. Just my first name and last name, Daniel Di Martino, that you see there, at Daniel Di Martino on Instagram and Twitter, or X. I mean, you can, I do events everywhere with YAF like Nick. So I'm going to be doing a ton upcoming. I'm going to the Freedom Conference that they're hosting in Nashville. I am doing an event here in New York City on January 28th with America's Future Foundation. So we're just look me up.
I think we'll both be at those. I think we'll both be at the Freedom Festival. Yeah, the one in Nashville.
Yes.
I'll be at that one as well. So I'll see you there. Good, because that was my.
Maybe we'll get an update of what's going on, and we can have a conversation in person.
Well, and my big question. Okay, so the audience doesn't know this, but one of the things that I did as soon as this whole thing was kicking off is I was trying to text people. I have some friends in the military, friends in the intelligence community, friends in the administration, going, "Hey, when are Americans going to be allowed to go to Venezuela?" And Daniel was one of the ones like, "Hey, Kyle, ask Daniel when can I get into Venezuela?" He goes, "It's probably going to be a little while." But I do look forward. That's
going to be. I think that's another sign of goodwill. We need Americans. The 5 Americans that are kidnapped by the regime right now need to be released immediately.
Yeah. Well,
do they really fear us if they have Americans arrested?
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I will tell you, we had already planned some international trips this year, kind of talking about things that were going on in Central and in South America. And I would. So here's my hope, Daniel. My hope, Dan, is that I can go to Venezuela and you can show me around.
We can go together.
Your beautiful country.
And we can get some arepas and a lot of great things.
Well, again, thank you very much, Daniel, and thank you very much to the audience. If you have some questions, throw them in the chat. And I'm telling you right now, Daniel's a guy that you're going to want to follow. I believe that before any of this was going down. I remember being very, very impressed and him being able to share his story and his knowledge for what it was like. And let's face it, we live in a country right now where at the same time that we're helping to topple a socialist dictator in South America, we're electing socialists in New York City. And everyone is asking, how is this possible? And I'll tell you how it's possible. Go into your kid's public school, go into your kid's university, because the only place that Marxism thrives is in our education system. And it was so great. I was so grateful to see someone like Daniel, who was out there talking to college students, high school students, middle school students, sharing his experience and giving incredibly good, both rigorous academic arguments for free markets, for private property, but also being able to share from his very unique experience. That's the sort of thing that young people need to hear, not just in their 20s when they're on their way to the polls. That's something that they need as part of their general education, because to be free politically, but not to be free economically is useless. Freedom has to be more than simply getting to arbitrarily select your leaders. If you live in a country where the politicians get to control what you do, what you own, where you live, where you work, it doesn't matter that you get to vote for them, right? You're not free. And so it's so important that we keep that dynamic. Please go follow Daniel. Once again, thank you very much for watching, and we'll see you next episode.